Well, hello, everybody. We're back with another episode of the Enneagram in a Movie, and we are going to be talking about Emilia Perez today. And I got to tell you, TJ, I, first of all, I really enjoyed this movie. It affected me. It worked for me, and that is saying a lot. Not because of the subject matter, but because there is singing in it. And I am just a guy who does not like my movies with singing that aren't part of like a character who's a singer or something, right? But I don't enjoy the whole musical number inserted into a movie. And in that scene where she first breaks into song, my immediate thought was of the TV show Cop Rock from back in the 1980s, and how you're really taking a risk when you start singing in a movie. But this one worked for me. So I'm looking forward to talking about this. So TJ, let me, flip this over to you. Tell us about Emilia Perez and your feeling about movies with singing in them.
Well, first of all, let me just say I'm shocked that you're not a huge musical fan. I had you pegged as the kind of person who watches Sound of Music at least once a week.
Yes, right, right. I'll tell you, my idea, if you really, really, really want to torture me, tie me down and make me watch Baz Luhrmann movies. I mean, that's just, I mean, I will look for ways to gnaw my own arm off or something to. So anyway, go ahead.
I too am not so much of a fan of musicals. Like
Hmm.
it's just a style of music that has never worked for me. I didn't grow up listening to them. My parents didn't have the soundtracks.
Yeah,
And it was bizarre to me when I reached adulthood and realized there are people my age who not only love musicals, but have dedicated their lives to performing in them
yeah,
or writing them. I just don't connect with that kind of music at all. As a movie genre, there can be some kind of retro enjoyment of
yeah.
the golden age of Hollywood and that kind of
Right.
thing.
Yeah,
Like I
singing
enjoy
in the
to,
rain or something. Yeah,
yeah, I enjoy Singing in the Rain.
yeah,
But Hollywood has seemed to want to revive the genre ever since its demise. And the public hasn't really been on board with this, and they keep on trying. So I too was curious when I heard that this was a musical and loved it.
yeah.
It was not the style of music that I think of with musical theater or musical films.
Right.
It didn't have the kind of heart on its sleeve, over emotive, emphatic songwriting or singing style.
Yeah,
Nor did it ever pretend that actual strangers were joining in somebody's spontaneous song with choreography. They made it very clear that every musical number was expressionistic. This is just how this person feels in this moment. We're just playing it out in a non-realistic way, but never pretending like this is actually happening in the reality of
right,
this world.
right. And I think that's the key thing. So, one of the things that the making it a musical did was make you suspend disbelief and to experience the character and experience the emotion rather than trying to address the topic logically. Excuse me, I'm fighting a cold here, so bear with me a sec. But yeah, so it was, and I think in that sense it was effective, right? Because for me, whenever you're interjecting something unnatural, whether it be music or wizards or dragons or something, um, you have to then step outside of your expectations, and the movie that you're watching or the show that you're watching has to work in terms of the new rules it has set up. Okay. And so, because again, on this topic, if something has wizards in it, I don't care, right? I mean, because it's like you can solve any problem you want by just magicking your way out of it. Okay. So I have no interest in Harry Potter or the Hobbit stuff with with the wizards and all that. I just, because it can become a convenient plot device. One of the things I enjoyed about, Game of Thrones that had, some magic in it and that had dragons in it, for the most part, it stayed consistent to the rules that it set up, right, within that new world. And that's hard to do. And so I think, again, with this movie, it kind of sends you a message. Hey, look, we're exploring some things that are kind of freaking crazy here, and we know it. But let's look past that and see what this says about humanity in some way. Okay. So for me, it worked in that regard. Um, Go ahead.
Yeah, I recently rewatched Leaving Las Vegas, which I hadn't seen
Oh,
since it
wow.
was in the theaters.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to watch that now and realize just how unrealistic that movie is in so many ways. It's presented as 100% realistic. The
Mm.
laws of physics are never broken. But like this alcoholic who's going to drink himself to death is in great shape. And he attracts a sex worker who is literally movie star good looking,
Yeah.
who just falls in love with him right away and decides that she wants to take care of him right onto his deathbed.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is less realistic than wizards and elves and fairies.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's basically a white male writer's fantasy of like,
Yes.
this is what
Yeah.
it should be like.
Yes.
Yeah,
Elizabeth Shue is going to nurse me while I drink myself to death. Yes. Right.
totally. She's gonna look amazing the whole
Yeah.
time. She's
Yeah.
gonna forgive me all my transgressions, all of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like how many movies are actually realistic?
Right.
Like so many of them are fantasies. Mindy Kaling said that about rom-coms. She considers them just as fantastical as Star Wars or Star Trek,
Mm.
and she loves them for that reason.
Right.
And Star Wars and Star Trek make no attempt whatsoever to adhere to the laws of physics. You know, there's fast and light air or space travel and things like
Right.
that. There's gravity in space. Like
Right.
they don't even try to explain it. Or if they do, it's just a nominal mumbo jumbo technical explanation.
Right.
Most of this stuff is fantasy.
Yes. Time travel movies fall into that as well, right? And there's that
Yeah.
great scene in one of the Marvel movies where they're, kind of critiquing the premises of time travel movies and that sort of thing. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. Mm.
So yeah, if you're going to make it non-realistic, why not acknowledge it? Why
Yes.
not have fun with it? Why
Yeah.
not turn up the dials
Yeah.
and emphasize like this is not the real world we're talking about?
Yeah. So why don't you tell us about the movie Emilia Perez, for people who are not familiar with it, or just to kind of summarize what the movie is and what it's about.
Yeah, so Emilia Perez came out in 2024 and it's directed by a French director, Jacques Audiard. And it starts from the point of view of Rita Mora Castro, who's a lawyer in Mexico City, played by Zoe Saldana. And she gets brought in to facilitate a cartel gangster's gender affirmation surgery, as well as her faking her death and starting a new life. This character is played by Carla Sofia Gascon, who is a trans woman from Spain. So all of this is going to mean setting up the wife of the gangster, played by Selena Gomez, and her two children in Switzerland, and having them believe that this gangster has actually died. After 4 years, Emilia Perez, as she calls herself after transition, wants to move back to Mexico and have her children back and gets back in touch with this lawyer, Rita, who makes it happen, with the fiction that Perez is a distant cousin to her former self. So her old family moves back in with her. Then, after a chance encounter with a woman looking for her missing 23-year-old son, Perez then starts a charity that works to locate, exhume, and identify the remains of people who've been disappeared by the cartels. Through this, she meets and falls in love with a woman. Meanwhile, Jesse, Selena Gomez, plans to marry and move in with a man, which Emilia immediately forbids. Jesse escapes with the kids. Emilia freezes Jesse's access to her money, and this leads to an escalating sequence of violence that takes both of their lives.
Yeah, just your everyday Hallmark plot of.
Yeah, and not your standard gangster movie plot, not your standard, like, there isn't a standard transition story plot,
Right.
but like, it just, what genre would this belong? It's certainly not your standard musical plot.
Yeah. So I am of the school of thought that we shouldn't look for meanings and messages in movies necessarily. And in fact, when a message is too vivid, it's not really a great movie, right? Whenever we kind of, I'm of the school of thought that, you know, uh, For example, I recently watched the movie Taxi Driver with my son. Okay, he had never seen it before. He's 21 now. So we watched Taxi Driver and Raging Bull back to back, which is an interesting experience. Um, and you can look at, say, Taxi Driver and ask yourself, okay, what is the meaning of that? What lesson am I supposed to take away? And I've become more and more of the school of thought of don't look for messages, right? Just experience them and see how you're moved by them. And what, because any message you take is going to be some message that you're Rorschaching into the movie, right? And, and it's probably really, really different from the director's idea or conception of what he might have been trying to say if he was, trying to send a message to begin with. Sometimes stories just stand on their own, and if it's a compelling enough story, it presents things for us to stew upon. Okay? And this is the way I kind of walked away from Emilia Perez. I'm not going to look for what message are they trying to tell me here. I'm thinking, okay, what am I taking from this? How am I going to think about it? So for all that said as preamble, for me, this movie was, don't think a genius. It was about transformation. Okay. And is transformation possible or not? Okay. And is transformation something that has to be this dramatic of this drug kingpin, this cartel lord, faking his own death to transition to a woman? Um, so for me, the questions about transformation, change, and if we are able to love ourselves for who we are, and what does it take to do so, are kind of the themes I ended up wrestling with. Thoughts on theme, message, takeaways from the movie.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And before I answer my response to that, my question to you is, how did that make you feel to stew in that? Because it sounds like you did.
It so I always look. So I'm an executive coach, and I tell people that I have been in the people changing business for 27 years, and the one thing I have learned is that people don't change. Okay, this doesn't mean that they don't grow. It doesn't mean that they don't evolve, but we're fundamentally who we are, and we see this with Emilia Perez too, because Manitas comes back, right? At a certain point, okay? Even though Emilia did everything she could, when Manitas is the drug kingpin who transitions and becomes Emilia. And Manitas is trying to find a way to love himself and thinks that, I'll love myself when I'm being my true self, which is a woman. And and look, I'm not going to add commentary on the transition that people go through, right? I mean, I have no way of evaluating, judging, assessing, opining on that experience for people, right? What I do know is that my only reaction is to try and express compassion for people when they're going through what they're going through. And as an executive coach, my job is to be there for people with compassion and support and structure as they are working on transforming little bits at a time, but not ever assuming that they need to be something different than what they are, other than a more evolved and healthier version of what they are, a more skillful version of what they are. And so my experience of these characters was to feel compassion for them, and respect for what they were wrestling with, because we're all, all wrestling with the question of, am I worthy of love? And what do I have to do in order to feel worthy of love? Because even though we don't talk about it, Okay. And even though we can look at a character like Emilia Perez and say, oh my goodness, she was, wrestling with some deep shit, we're all wrestling with deep shit on what it means to be loved, to love ourselves, to feel lovable, to be able to truly step outside of ourselves and love other people. Okay. So yeah, my reaction was compassion. Um,
Nice.
um, and and why are they singing?
Just a quick side note on the music.
Yeah,
I really liked it. Like there wasn't one song that I thought, oh, this is gonna get stuck in my head and I'm gonna have to find somebody to rinse it out. Like maybe it's
yeah,
because the songs were in Spanish and I didn't know them, but they weren't part of the musical theater style that I really don't care for.
yeah. Yeah, well, I've got to say, I'll never hear the word laryngeotomy again the same way, But yeah, I hear you.
And might be an obvious question, but what type do you think Emilia Perez is?
Yeah, so this was quite interesting to me, and so I think she was an eight. And so the eight is striving to feel powerful. Okay, now so it was interesting. There's also on Netflix where I watched this. There is a making of show that was very good. I watched that too, and something they point out is that whenever Manitas was the focus, right? Like up until Manitas transitions, everything happens at night. Okay, it's dark. And then everything turns bright when Emilia shows up. Okay. And then it becomes night again at the end when it, when kind of and when I say that Manita shows back up again, it's that rage and anger and desire for power and control that kind of, you know, undermines all the good that she had done to that point and kind of sets off, the events that lead to such tragedy. But clearly, Manitas, the drug kingpin, that was an eightish. That was a scary, scary guy. But even more so was to me, which was extremely vivid, was the stunting of vitality that is so core to the heart of what it is to be an eight. When we talk about these core qualities of vitality, what the eight is struggling with, we're all struggling with it to some extent, but for the eight, it's the core issue of I feel dead inside and I need to recapture what it means to feel alive. And the eight often does this through excess. Okay. Excess can become this substitute for this vitality of truly feeling alive. And so this story is about Manitas trying to recapture vitality, this feeling of being alive, this vibrancy, this color, right? Everything is dark. Everything that Manitas wears is gray and blends into the background. And then when he becomes Emilia, all of a sudden there's these bright colors and this shining and this expressiveness, right? So yeah, so for me, this was very, very much a eight-ish arc of what the eight is wrestling with at a very deep, deep level. That's my theory. What was your thoughts? So,
Absolutely, yeah. Well, there's a couple of things. Is when we meet Manitas at the beginning of the movie, they establish he's a cartel gangster. We don't find out any specific details of atrocities that he's either initiated or approved of or partaken in. But by definition,
yeah,
cartel gangster, like you can take it to the bank.
yes,
This is a, about as brutally tough a character as you could have. At the same time, we see this tremendous tenderness and affection in this family gathering, lying down on the ground, the two young boys between Manitas and Jesse, the wife. And the kids are like nestled next to
yeah.
him or
I
crawling
think it's a
onto
boy and a
him.
girl, isn't it? It's a boy and a girl, isn't one of them a
I
girl?
can't quite remember.
Okay.
But
All right.
in any case, like
Yeah.
a, a tender, loving parent,
Yeah.
which gets to that quality of innocence that we talk about with
Yeah.
eights. And that at the beginning of the movie coexists with this brutal cartel gangster. It's not like that has to be done in private, otherwise the subordinates won't respect me anymore and will kill me and overtake me. It's like I am that strong that I can display this tenderness at a big gathering with a lot of other criminals there.
Yeah.
And it's no threat to my authority. And it doesn't seem to cause any cognitive dissonance in
Right.
that I might order however many deaths in a given day and be this tender, loving parent.
Yeah. And this you see, this is almost a cliche about AIDS, right? It is a cliche about AIDS where, it's, this almost saccharine sweetness in this safe, expected circumstances, right? Tenderness toward children, tenderness toward old people. I was I was having a dinner with a group of people recently, and one of them is this real tough South Philly transmitting eight. Okay, a guy who's been, like laying cinder blocks and running construction businesses in South Philly since he was 15, right? And the love of his life is a Chihuahua, right? And he just goes on and on about his sweetheart and his, and shows pictures and all this stuff. And it's like just so, I don't know, almost striking in the difference. But any eight would do the same thing, right? But you drop a cinder block on his hand and you're not going to see a tear, right? Because that would make him a wimp, you know. But he'll sob talking about his Chihuahua. So, yeah, and we see this in Manitas.
Yeah, kind of like Don Vito Corleone playing with
Yeah.
his grandson.
Yes. Yes.
Just this, and he's play acting as a monster with him.
Yes.
He's kind of spoofing his own eightness,
Yes.
putting an orange in his mouth and that kind of thing, roaring around, but
Right.
pulling back when the grandson gets scared
Yes.
and then re-engaging. Yeah, so it's beautiful. And then later, when the character transitions, and a major plot point is the initiation of this charity to exhume and identify bodies of cartel victims. Magnanimity is what came to
Yes.
mind. A very strong, positive quality of healthy eights.
Yes. 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 Absolutely. It is. And there's often in eights um, a desire for atonement, right? Of seeking forgiveness for my sins, because there are sins in the background for most eights. There are these revelations to them of unintended or, intended cruelty that they later feel guilty for, this harshness, this trampling, often accidentally, of other people's needs and feelings that they at some point start to feel tremendously guilty for, right? And, want to atone for. And this is what we see. We see that great scene where that woman has the flyers of her missing son, and we see the growing discomfort in Emilia, right? And you can see her wanting to flee, right? Wanting to, get this away from me, wanting to keep it pushed out until she says, no, no, I need to make amends, right? To seek atonement for this. And again, this is where we get into, to your earlier point about absurdity, right? Because what I'm thinking is, all right, wait a minute. Here's this woman who's clearly very, very wealthy and starting this charity. How are you going to explain who you are and where you got all this money? And, when the spotlight does start to shine on you, how are you going to, just come up out of nowhere as this super wealthy woman? And quite frankly, in a very dangerous, region of the world where if you're really, really wealthy, you need to have lots and lots of protection and, all this sort of stuff, right? So, but again,
And you're poking the cartels.
yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. You're exposing the sins, not just of yourself, but of so many, others. Um, but again, it's like, all right, let's just roll with it, right? That's the details are not the point here. Okay. So, all right.
Yeah, and there's an exchange that really hit me because I watched this twice now, the second time, which when that woman, the first woman that was handing out the flyers, my
Yeah.
missing 23-year-old son, that's the first body that's exhumed and identified. And then uh, Emilia reunites with that woman and kind of gives her the confirmation. And that woman holds her hand or does some kind of gesture. And Emilia has a thought saying, feeling that woman's touch was the first time that I felt my own heart.
Yeah.
Something to that effect
Yeah.
of like, that's when I suddenly felt this thing, this magnificence, I suppose, that goes along with magnanimity, as well as
Yeah.
this innocence, this willingness to be touched, and maybe this aliveness more than
Yes.
anything else. That
Yes.
obviously she doesn't use these words, but as an eight that I've been looking for more than anything else in my life.
Yeah.
And there it came from the least expected place,
Yes.
from an act of selfless generosity to
Yes.
someone that I didn't know.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So and again, the challenge for Amelia is when she faces the risk of losing the children, right? Because again, the premise is that her ex-wife did not know she was Manitas, and
Again,
so
a bit of a stretch,
yeah, yeah, right.
but
So
like, okay.
yeah, yeah, right. And so that's good to, and that's why I thought the other child was a daughter because there was that wonderful, wonderful scene where he's in bed with the child and she starts saying to Amelia, "You smell like daddy." Right. And,
Yeah,
you smell like dogs and
it's a whole
gasoline. And
song.
it's a
And
whole song.
Coca-Cola with
Yeah,
lime.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and as a parent, as a father, I mean, that just tore me up, right? I mean, that just, I mean, I have a hard time even talking about that scene right now, and can't imagine how difficult that would be for Amelia to experience that, and then at the risk of that disappearing, when the wife, and I'm drawing a blank on her name, Jessie
Jesse.
announces she's going to remarry and take the kids with her, well, okay, we've reawakened the bear, right? And and again, this is where tragedy starts to fall, and it's that idea of the fatal flaw, right, in characters, and that goes back to Aristotle of that anger, that possessiveness, that need to control that's so deep in the heart of the eight that becomes that tool for dealing with pain, right? A threat of loss and pain bring out that aggressive need to control and that tendency toward violence. And Amelia, again, we start to see the merging of Amelia and Manitas here.
And that need for control is focused not on running an empire,
No,
but on my children.
yes,
So you've got this combination of eight-ish elements kind of locked together and working against each other of that innocence, that tenderness, that love, that aliveness that Amelia gets from being a parent, from being near her kids,
yeah,
that she missed so much in the 4 years in which fiction was maintained that Manitas had died,
yeah,
and all of that, versus the need to hold on to them, to live in the same house with them, to take
right,
care of them, to touch them, to know what's going on with them day after day, to have an active role in their lives, to not be able to let that go. That exact eight-ish combination is what brings about the tragedy
yes,
that is the final act of the movie.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think we're agreed then that Amelia is a type eight, and based on the making of, I'm guessing that the actor is as well. I forget her name, but
Carla Sofia Gascon.
yeah, who I was not familiar with prior to this, but listening to the director talking about how, you know, I I I would run everything past, her and get her approval and her input and stuff, right? So it was almost like, having to get permission to make changes or, is this working or is this right? So it was almost like the actress was you know, the one running the show, even when making the movie, right? So again, very eight-ish. All right. So, so let's talk about Zoe Saldana's character for a moment. And now I got to say, I've always been a big fan of hers, but I always think of her as, the big budget. She's one of these people who not many people really know, but she's been in huge movies, right? I mean, the Marvel movies, Guardians of the Galaxy, the James Cameron 3D one,
Avatar.
Avatar. Thank you. Yeah, that
She's in the
Star
Star
Trek.
Trek.
Yeah, Star
Yeah.
Trek as Uhuru. Just wonderful, wonderful, very gifted, sort of physical actor. She's got a dance background, but so she can play a convincing acting. I'm sorry, convincing acting, blah, action hero, and is also just a strikingly beautiful woman, right? I mean, I've always been a big fan, but I didn't know she had this kind of talent, quite frankly. So,
I didn't know she spoke Spanish. I didn't know that her last name was correctly pronounced Saldana.
uh-huh. Hmm.
She's Dominican and Puerto Rican, and
Yes,
I read on Wikipedia that Spanish was the primary language spoken at home growing up in New Jersey.
yes, yes. And So her character was named Rita, and she plays an attorney who is kind of frustrated about, not being recognized for her capabilities and what she's contributing. And she gets this kind of mysterious call, in a very creepy sort of way. She's using the ladies' room, and the guy, turns out to be Manitas, is asking her why she's hiding in the ladies' room, right? And then she's kidnapped and, ends up taking this assignment. Um, and so she is also someone looking for fulfillment and satisfaction and self-respect and self-love. Um, your thoughts on her Enneagram type?
Yeah, I saw her as a three.
Hmm. Okay.
She's a lawyer. She's a professional. Not that all threes are lawyers, but like she's gravitated towards a prestigious profession. She does it very, very well in service of clients she doesn't actually believe in. So in the opening scene, she's working to prepare the argument to literally help a client get away with murder. And it's successful. And it's a senior attorney, a man, who gets the credit for it. She's writing the brief, he's delivering it to the court. So what you get with her, which she expresses quite blatantly in the songs, because a lot of the songs express her in her life, are kind of, is this all there is? Which to me is a very three-ish theme. If here I am, this person striving to feel outstanding, I've put all this time and energy into becoming very, very good at something, and I do that thing, and I do it very, very well. And what's the point? And as they mentioned a few times in the movie, she doesn't have a romantic partner. She doesn't have kids. She would like to have both, but just doesn't seem to be happening right now. So she's got all the proficiency and efficiency in the world and nowhere to put it in service of that she really cares about.
Yeah. And again, she blossoms, helping Amelia transition. When we see her 4 years later, she is a very different person because I got to say, as attractive as Zoe Saldana is, and I'll try to pronounce her name the proper way, Saldana. Um, um, she looked a little rough in the first part of the movie, right? Purposely so. And but then when we see her in London, she's again back to this, very striking, beautiful. She has bloomed, okay, in a sense, right? And then again, we see the tenuousness of the bloom in this way, right? So when she is living with some sort of purpose and meaning, which she's experiencing as she's helping with this organization to find the disappeared, again she is vibrant and blossoming. And then we see that starting to struggle as well towards the end as this wilts. So I think you're right, that it seemed probably best described as a three, probably a navigating three, which again would make it all around who am I, right? Where do I fit in here? What's my identity? But it's not as much around kind of looking for it inside of myself as it is with Emilia, right? It's about my role in the group that gives me a sense of meaning, right? I have a job to do, which is often again, like you said, the satisfaction that threes seek to find.
Right. And she's very good at it. So when, she gets this unusual assignment to, first of all, find a doctor to facilitate the gender reaffirmation surgery, she's flying all over the world and arranging her flight so she can be back in court like later that
Yeah,
same
right,
week.
right,
Like that's
right,
somebody who's on top of their duties and
right,
does them very well.
right.
Um, so she's able to maintain the fiction that Manitas has died and keep that secret to the wife and kids, as well as do all the paperwork for like getting them new passports, setting up a new life for them in Switzerland, all these kinds of things. It's like it's not only threes that can do that, but
Right.
threes seem to really thrive and are often in roles where it's like, I need this list of difficult things done. I need them done efficiently and quickly with no exceptions, no leaks are going to sprout.
Yeah.
I'm on it. And she does it.
Yeah. And what I like about this character is that it's not the obvious kind of, Reese Witherspoon version of the three, like from Legally Blonde or something, which is very stereotypical, or Election, or that sort of thing, or a Tom Cruise-ish, Jerry Maguire kind of three. But it's a nuanced, right? I mean, this is a well-rounded character, and what I started to, think again, if we go back to the, the breaking out in song part of it, it always seemed to happen when Rita needed to be honest with herself, right? It's almost like, okay, I have to really face what I'm struggling with. And I almost need this other way to do it because I don't know how to do it otherwise, right? I don't know how to be honest with myself conventionally. So this is the thing I need to make that conversation happen.
And it's occurring to me as you're saying this, done in solitude.
Yes.
None of her songs are her pouring out her heart to a confidant or
Right.
a therapist
Right.
or a coworker or anything like that. It's her processing it on her own. And then the other
Yes.
people in the song are, by implication, people who just happen to be in that environment.
Yeah.
But it's very strongly got across that this is all happening internally.
Right. Right.
It's almost like I can't go into my feeling mode if I'm going to be in functioning mode,
Right.
and vice versa. So if I
Right.
can set aside, if I can just hit pause on all the things I need to do, I'll take some time to really wrestle with what I'm feeling, go into that, figure that out, and then come out the other side. Okay, now I know what to do.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, well done character. Excellent, excellent performance by Zoe Saldana, which gave me, a new appreciation for her as an actor and as a talent.
Right.
Do you know, was she
And singer
nominated?
dancer.
Yeah, right, exactly, right.
Yeah, she's nominated for Best Supporting Actor, which I thought is strange because I thought that's just as much of a lead role, but that's the kind of political decision that gets made in terms of like who do we think is most likely to win, rather
Right.
than how much screen time do they actually have.
Yeah, and the Emilia Perez character is just so impactful, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's like Scottie Pippen playing with, with Michael Jordan, right? I mean, Michael Jordan's not on the team. You're talking about Scottie Pippen, right? But, he had the, good fortune slash misfortune of playing with Michael Jackson. I'm Michael Jackson, Michael Jordan. So
the Michael Jackson of basketball.
there you go. Uh, yeah. So, uh, all
One
right.
more thing to mention about her character is
Yeah.
that the arc of her really blossoming as she's helping with this charity is something that's often written about with threes as well. Because as we talked about earlier, she's very good at being a lawyer. It's not in service of something she cares about.
Hmm.
So, what is actually my heart's desire? And something that I've read, it's talked about in the wisdom of the Enneagram, and other teachers have said it too, is a three will often find fulfillment in an avenue that isn't necessarily prestigious. It's not necessarily what the person dreamed of doing growing up or gets rewards from society for doing. The rewards are personal and yet far more fulfilling than the salary they earn or the gold medal that gets put around their neck.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because the issue with the three is around value. Okay, what is my worth? What is my value? And they fall into the impression that value is attained externally, right? And what they're actually hungering for at a deep level is a feeling of inherent worth independent of accomplishment that's recognized by others. And so when they're able to do these things where they, in her case, she's almost like a background, but she's literally a background player to Emilia, right? There's that scene where they go out on stage and Emilia doesn't even ask her, or tell her how she looks or ask her how she's doing. And then she gets kind of just pushed to the side. So, but what she's offering, and then she gets feedback later from, I think it's from Fatima, about how Emilia valued her so much and it's rewarding to her. But by this point, she had already found that sense of satisfaction in something that, was quieter and less obvious in the way that you're talking about here. Um,
and makes the world a better place.
yes, yes. It's also interesting, and I don't want to read too much into this, but it's intriguing to me that because the three thing is so much about identity, that what they were doing is about identifying bodies and identifying what happened to these people and what's the fate of these people, what became of. It's almost like these people who were disappeared. I mean, they disappeared, right? And this is bringing them back to the world and, reminding people of who they are and what they are and giving closure and all this stuff. So I don't know. I know I'm weaving pieces together there, but some interesting thoughts that come out of that. Um, so let's talk about Fatima, the woman that Emilia falls in love with. Interesting choice of names. For example, Fatima means faith, right? I'm pretty sure. So, and so it is this, and so she comes in, so she gets a message from the organization that Emilia and Rita are running that they have found her husband. And what happened was they found his remains, but she didn't understand that it was the remains. She thought that they, found her husband who'd been missing for 5 years, which does not make Fatima happy. And in fact, she comes to the meeting with a knife, planning to kill her husband because he had abused her and raped her and all these other horrible things. And she's relieved to find out that he is dead. And her and Fatim, I'm sorry, her and Emilia connect and fall in love. Um, Thoughts about the Fatima character?
She's not in the movie a hell of a lot, so I didn't get a really strong impression. I suppose if I had to postulate her type, it might be six,
Mm.
in that she's anticipating a problem. She's also quite scared. She's not aggressive, but she's terrified that she might have to do this horrible thing, and she's ready to do it.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's about as far as I thought about her.
yeah, yeah. I could have gone. I could go six. I could go two. Also, there was this. I think for me, Fatima sort of represented innocence and um, um, innocence and just pure love for Emilia, right? I mean, it seems almost like the first time that someone is actually loving Emilia for who she is rather than, being loaded with a whole lot of baggage, right? I mean, it's almost like, you don't know who I was, you don't know who I am now. We're just having this connection in some way. And then she's the one, after Amelia is dead and they have the parade for her with the statue. I'm sure there's a name for those statues and those kind of Catholic masses. But Fatima is kind of the one leading the procession, as a dedication to this woman that she loved. It just struck me as a very, very sweet and pure kind of relationship. That was I don't know, kind of a respite from the rest of what was happening for Amelia's life. So,
Yeah, that's interesting. And you can see that as possible, not that it was conceived of this way, but there's a connection between 8 and 2 in the Enneagram.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a way of evoking that kind of tender, loving sweetness in
Yeah.
Emilia as an 8.
Yeah. Yeah. And having dated some twos, earlier in my life, I can see one of them showing up with a knife, at the wrong moment. So I think there's a tendency to overestimate the two's, purity, and not recognize that connection to point eight, that can make two's pretty aggressive people when they need to be. So yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
There's steel in a 2
Yes.
that isn't necessarily part of the stereotypical picture of them.
Yes. Yes. All right. Good. Any other characters that you would comment on? It really was not. There weren't a huge number of main characters. Well, we haven't talked about Jesse. Any thoughts on Jesse?
I'm drawing a blank. Jessie is the wife played by Selena Gomez, and she doesn't have a tremendous amount to do. So I wasn't able to get a really strong picture of her as a character,
Yeah.
at least in terms of what her personality type might be.
Yeah.
Did anything pop for you?
No, it didn't. Well, actually, as I'm thinking about it, where I would probably go is transmitting nine. Okay. And I mean, clearly a transmitting character, right? She was, yeah, I mean, she was flashy and as you would expect from a drug cartel's kingpin's wife or something. Not that I've met that many, but that's how they always look on TV. Uh, um, but there was this loss of identity in the strong other, both in her relationship with Manitas and in her relationship with Gustavo that came later, right? There was almost this I'm being swept along by the strong other, even though I still have this strong desire and this still need to be seen and this still, this need to feel and to live and to be sexual. But I'm under the control of others. And that's something I see with transmitting nines is this tendency to lose themselves in the significant other, to lose their sense of identity in that way and their sense of um, agency almost, even though they can be very aggressive and autonomous in other relationships. So that would be my best guess, I think.
That would fit with the way she disappears in the middle of the night with the kids and all their stuff.
Yes. Yes.
No parting words, no fight,
Yeah.
just like vanishes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, of course, Amelia is able to freeze her bank account so that prevents her from really getting away.
Yeah.
But if she hadn't been able to do that, probably never would have seen her again,
Right.
which
Right.
is kind of, not like nines are the only type that can do that, but is kind of a nine-ish way
Yeah.
to disentangle oneself from somebody is
Yeah.
just vanish.
Yeah. There's a sort of a passive aggressiveness in a way, right? Or an
Yeah.
avoidance of the conflict. So good. All right. So closing thoughts, TJ, on Emilia Perez.
Something we haven't mentioned, and I only know this because there's been some scuttlebutt about it, is there are a few controversies surrounding the movie. For instance, having a movie that's set in Mexico but written and directed by a European man, having three Mexican leads as characters but not as actors. Um, all of that. I've also seen that the movie has drawn some criticism for having a one-dimensional portrayal of the trans experience. Fortunately for us, that's not what we're here to talk about. Like none of that
Yeah.
is relevant to the Enneagram.
Yeah.
But I just want to acknowledge that the movie has a few stains on its
Yeah.
reputation. I hope that this movie, with the success it's had, with certainly with awards and with public awareness, just makes it that much more likely that we will see more movies about the rest of the world and about trans people, because there are many, many stories that haven't been told, that aren't being told, that it should be.
Yeah, and I'll say too that unfortunately, here in the United States, you're Canadian. Just for anybody who might not be aware of that, so I'm not going to throw you into this same bucket. We are going through a time of real sadness in the backlash related to some of these issues, and I am hoping that if nothing else, people will walk away from this movie just with more of a sense of compassion for the things that people are wrestling with and struggling with. And we do not know what pain other people are experiencing. We do not know It always frustrates me to hear people minimize or demonize what trans people or gay people or are going through in their experience, and this advice of, well, why don't you just blank, right? Why don't you just deal with it? Why don't you just whatever? Not just shut up, right? Just shut up, have some compassion, okay? Worry about your own stuff and try and spread as much love and support as we can. So hopefully this movie will help with that.
Amen.
All right. So with that, we're going to do something really, really different next time. Again, I'm going to set this up because I'm excited about this, TJ. Uh, One of my all-time favorite movies has just become available again after years in, I don't know, the availability wilderness. So next time we're going to talk about the movie To Live and Die in L.A. With directed by William Friedkin, with kind of starring Willem Dafoe in one of his very early film roles, William Peterson, our friend from Manhunter, and what else was he in? I think I pretty much
CSI.
CSI, yeah. And he had a real small part as the bartender in Thief, but that's a whole nother thing.
For all you rabid fans of Thief out there.
Yeah. But there's a Michael Mann connection between those movies, and yeah, So anyway, and so Willem Dafoe, William Peterson, and Robert Downey Sr. is in it. So now we will find out why Robert Downey Jr. is Robert Downey Jr. instead of just Robert Downey, right? So anyway, I'm looking forward to talking about that one. And so, TJ, it was always fun talking about these. And until next
Always.
time. All right.
I'll see you
So
soon.
so long.